Oh my God. Okay, so as I sit to make this video, I am sitting here uh doing the mix down of the final pre-master mix of the last song for the new Axis of Empires album. Fuck yeah. If you're just joining us and not used to my channel, this is what I've been going on and on about for months at this point, and it's almost done. Fuck yeah. So I'm going to import that into the um, session where I'm doing all the normalization and everything and kick it out and upload it. And the new Axis of Empires album should be available to you in the next couple of weeks. It'll be before the end of the year, but it'll just as soon as they get it up there. Anyway, so as I was working, I was watching not Run, Hide, Fight, Terror on the Prairie, which is one of the Daily Wire's one of the Daily Wire's flagship original movies. I got the I got a month-long pass to the Daily Wire so that I could watch this Lady Ballers movie that they made. And I gave that one a mixed to negative review. But I decided, since I've got the subscription, I'll go ahead and look at all of the other entertainment offerings that they have on the channel and see what I think. And someone recommended this one to me, that I start with this one, Terror on the Prairie. And this is their first, I believe this is their first proper in-house production. This is the first one they made and financed themselves. Run, Hide, Fight was just a distribution deal, but this is an actual Daily Wire release, Daily Wire production made by the Daily Wire and distributed by them, or financed and produced by the Daily Wire and distributed by them. And I have to say, as mixed of a review as I had, like I said, a mixed to negative review of Lady Ballers, this one, Terror on the Prairie, delivers the goods. They didn't, one of my main complaints against Lady Ballers was that it was kind of overly ambitious. There's the old saying, if you're going to shoot the king, don't miss. And with Lady Ballers, they were trying to not only take on an unbelievably controversial topic, but they were trying to do their first comedy all the while. And it just, it just felt like they were biting off more than they could chew. This movie, Terror on the Prairie, it's just a very simple premise. That there is a couple, a family, husband and wife and their children, living on the frontier in this, in this cabin in the wilderness and everything. And the husband, they realize they're going to have to leave the frontier life and go back to return to civilization. And so the husband rides into town looking for work. And while he's gone, the wife, played by Gina Carano, who was canceled for who gives a shit, is left alone with the kids, where she is then confronted and put under siege by a gang of outlaws. And so the whole premise is her defending herself until her husband can get back in time, her defending herself and the kids until the husband gets back in time and they can dispatch this problem together. And this is where I said it felt like with Lady Ballers, they were biting off more than they could chew. With this one, they really, it was, I will say, it was a masterpiece of economy. I think they knew they were making a small budget production. They built the story into, or they built the budget into the story. Like it did not feel like they were going to great excesses. It's a very simple to stage kind of story. And it really, again, rises and falls on the chemistry between the characters, and two, on the action and the shooting and the stunt work and all of that. I will say the story, you know, I had mentioned with Lady Ballers that that one felt like if you'd asked ChatGPT to write a treatment for a sports movie, a sports comedy about men pretending to be women to play women's sports, that was what it would spit out. You know, it's just the cliches of the genre. This one actually, while it was not anything terribly original, it's a western, an old, you know, the classic spaghetti western kind of story. It's internally consistent and doesn't feel like it has all of these like it never felt like it was trying. It never felt like it was attempting things, you know, and failing. Lady Ballers, it felt like they were just trying, you know, what can we try now to try to be funny? What can we try now to try to be funny? And 9 times out of 10, the jokes don't land and they don't make sense. This was very internally consistent. There's more to the story than what I just described. That's kind of evolves within the characters. You know, why these particular men, why this particular woman, that kind of thing. Those questions arise and are answered throughout the story, and it's very satisfying. They handled it well. And these are characters that these are simple people, salt of the earth people, but they are believable characters that have motives, you know, motives and goals consistent with what you'd expect in the time period. So it works. One of the main things that's likable about it is just how good it looks. It really does look good. And immediately when they had the opening shot, the way they did the color contrasting, that very particular color palette that they were using, and you know the kind of post production color schematic that they were putting on it and everything. That particular contrasting was very obvious that they were trying to channel the Sergio Leone, you know, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Fistful of Dollars, stuff like that. And that, of course, is a deeply satisfying thing. And so, like I said, this is not terribly original, but what it sets out to do, it does it well. I will say there was nothing conservative about the level of violence in this movie. Oh my God. We are talking over the top gut splattering violence like you wouldn't believe. Like, it's always one of those things where you can tell the special effects department is really having a good time with from the technical standpoint of making all of that shit happen and everything. And it was an absolute bloodbath from start to finish. And you could tell from a technical standpoint, all, as far as I could tell, all on-camera special effects and everything, and all practical special effects, and they were all done really well for the shootouts and the fighting and everything. There's even a scene there's one scene where she's helping a Native American woman by sewing the woman's wound shut, like giving her stitches, and of course the stitches have to be applied without anesthetic because it's the Wild West. And that is shown in all its bloody gory blood and gore and all its bloody details. So yeah, they were, one of the things was that I mentioned about Lady Ballers was that the conservatives who made it were too conservative to really let their hair down and be as outrageous as they needed to be. Excuse me while I do this. I'm just going to be bouncing the last part of the track, which. It's a song called Fallen by Nature, by the way. But anyway, so somebody, by the way, asked me for a video of me mixing live, which is not as interesting as Daft Punk and Bass Nectar make it sound, but make it seem on stage. But anyway, hang on just one second, I'm sorry, I need to check one thing. All right. Anyway, so just getting stuff done while I talk. Anyway, and I'm on a time budget here. Sorry, I have to check one more thing. Okay. Sorry to do that. Interrupt, but I'm on a time budget, and you will be glad I did what I just did. Anyway, so all right. Anyway, so getting back to the point, like I said, very satisfying film to watch that way. Now, getting into the kind of the history of it, they actually played up something that is crucially important in Old West narratives that is usually put in the background, but is very important for establishing a lot of these characters, especially the frontiersman, cowboy archetypes and everything. And that is, I don't want to give anything away because there are some nice twists along the path, but the characters. The characters in this story revolve around their background in the Civil War. And the father, this is not giving anything away, but the father is his background is that he started out as a Confederate soldier and defected to the Union Army, and that comes into the plot. And anyway, so what a lot of people talk about, if you look into the Westerns, Old West narratives, a lot of these archetypal cowboy trope type characters that we have, the dude from Red Dead Redemption, that kind of thing. I can't blanking on names right now, but anyway, these kinds of characters, the gruff, seldom speaking, man's man, tough as nails, man's man with a tortured, haunted past and everything. That is actually very culturally and historically significant. And the reason why is that archetype in storytelling emerged from the fact that after the Civil War, a lot of Confederate soldiers migrated out west looking for work. Why did they migrate out west? Well, here's the thing. So now, first of all, as I talk about and elucidate the details of Civil War history, please understand something. The Civil War was fought over slavery, period. It was the South fighting to preserve their right, what they saw as their right to maintain slaves. That is why the Civil War was fought. The North was fighting to stop the South from seceding so that they could maintain slavery. That is why. That is the only reason it was fought, and anyone that tells you any other reason that it was fought is either ignorant, full of shit, maliciously motivated, or some combination of all three. Now, that said, you have to understand that it is true that a great many, in fact, vast large numbers of men who fought for the Confederacy were not fighting because of slavery. You have, just like with any war, with any armed conflict, these are the men who are just the average grunts, Joe Schmo that needs a fucking paycheck, and he's going to go, this is why wars are so good at stimulating the economy. He needs that paycheck and he's going to go fight in it. Things like that. They may have had personal motivations, some of which may have. I'm not saying there was nobody that was fighting in the Confederacy that was pro-slavery. Obviously, there were. What I'm saying is, it's not so it's not evenly. The Civil War was not evenly divided into a Confederate army made up entirely of Ku Klux Klan members and a Northern army made up entirely of Black Lives Matter protesters. It's not like that. People got involved in that conflict for a lot of reasons, personal reasons. Okay, so why am I bringing this up? Well, obviously when the Civil War happened, you had men on both sides who saw human rights, not human rights, but human tragedy and human suffering and human problems. I'm sorry, I'm distracted by the fact that mix just finished bouncing down. But anyway, let me rephrase everything I was just saying. You had men on both sides who saw real human suffering, real human tragedy, and real violence and devastation on a grand scale. It was things that, the kind of things that people never recover from, the kind of things that give soldiers PTSD, even though they didn't know what that was at the time. And so, what was the effect on the Union Army? Well, they went home having seen all of this bloodshed and horror, but they were the winners. They went home victorious. They were welcomed home as heroes, and they got to celebrate and say, "Well, that sucked, but it was all worthwhile in the end." Then on the Confederate side, it was not so much. And now understand when I say this, Gone with the Wind, the book, is a work of fiction, and it portrays a version of the South that never existed and was never that idealistic. However, it is true that the South was shot to shit after World War II. That part of it, where everybody's like, "Oh fuck, what do we do now?" That is true. And so what you had was these men, these average Joe grunts, that go and they get home, and now, and this is why I emphasize that they weren't necessarily fighting to preserve slavery. They were guys that were just like fighting for a paycheck, fighting to have, feel like they had something meaningful to do with their lives, things like that. Okay, those average Joe schmoes come home from the war, and they don't get to come home victorious and be welcomed as heroes and all of that. Instead, they come home and they have witnessed human tragedy and human suffering on an ungodly, unconscionable level. They've probably killed people. They've probably done things in that war that they never thought they would do. And they come home and they think, well, shit, what was that for? And so consequently, you had a lot of those guys going out into the Old West, what we now call the Old West, the frontier, and working in these frontier towns to try to find work and everything, and also to kind of get away from the devastation back home. And that is where the archetype of this rough and tumble, seldom speaking, always scowling, cowboy, dark, disturbed cowboy with a haunted past, with comes from. And why does he have this wild death wish to that allows him to go charging into gunfire and all that? Because he's practically suicidal from all this. So that dark backstory of some of these characters that we think of as archetypal to this trope of the cowboy in the old Western, that has a legitimate cultural origin. And if you listen to like old John Wayne movies and that kind of thing, you will hear the characters establishing themselves as former members of the Confederacy, and that is by design. That is where this archetype developed. And so what I thought was really great, now to be very clear, and I know this is a question that's going to rise in people's minds because this is a conservative film, or it's not really a conservative film, but it's made by a conservative production company. The film is unquestionably on the side of the Union Army being the good guys in that conflict. There's nobody trying to be apologists for slavery or anything like that. It takes the time to make that point, so they're very clear about that. But what I thought was just so cool in terms of character development was that they actually dug into the tropes of they actually dug into the background and the origin of these tropes and where they come from, rather than just giving us stereotypes and predictable flat characters. That backstory is there, and I thought that is so cool. That made for such a satisfying watch, because without delving into that, it's it's just it boils down to tough as nails frontier people shooting at each other. But they actually developed the characters, developed their motives, and really did a good presentation. So that was very satisfying. Like I said, is it hugely original? No, but it was well done. Very well done. About the only thing I didn't like was they went for a very naturalistic approach where there's not a lot of a soundtrack. There's very little music and not a lot of soundtrack and that kind of thing. And that works sometimes. It works when you're making, No Country for Old Men. It works when you're making Dog Day Afternoon, and I think that's what they were going for with this, was like trying to make it very gritty and realistic in that way. But honestly, what we're doing here is what they're doing here is a very conscious throwback to an older time in Hollywood and an older style of filmmaking. And it would have been nice to have like an Ennio Morricone style score and everything, which, Jeremy Boring, if you're seeing this, I will do your soundtracks, sir. I will beat your best offer. Just I just need to figure out how to get in touch with you. You're in like Scandinavia making Pendragon, and I would love to do that. But anyway, it could have done with like an Ennio Morricone style score. That would have really, really helped. Like I said, is it on the level of Cormac McCarthy? No. But it is on the level of good cinema, good, satisfying, enjoyable cinema that takes the time to really give us what we want. I really will say, a lot of movies rise and fall on the basis of having a good quality villain. I liked the villain in this one, and because I love villains that have a strong moral code. This was a villain that is a principled man doing something. He's a principled man that's doing something outside of his principles, and that conflict is apparent to us. It's apparent that this is an honorable man that has fallen into a state of dishonor, and it made for a very compelling, very interesting, and watchable performance. And villains are often the most interesting parts of movies. So this guy who's the leader of the gang, I really liked him. The guy that played him was really good. It's funny. One of the bad guys was played by the guy who played the character Felix in Lady Ballers, so it was a little difficult to find him as menacing. And seeing it after this one, after that one, it was a little difficult to find him as menacing as I think they wanted him to be. But that was good. I think, probably the only production cliche that they fell into is what Roger Ebert calls the principle of evil marksmanship, where bad guys just can't, no matter how good a shot they are, they just can't seem to hit what they're aiming for when what they're aiming for is the good guy in the movie, that kind of thing. There was some bits like that, things where it was like, the important characters only survived because everyone that was shooting at them conveniently missed, that kind of thing. But other than that, like I said, real satisfying movie, and it's just like a simple story that just hit a really good spot. It's kind of like, to use a food metaphor, it's like you go to a local burger joint that just makes you a good cheeseburger. Like, it's not anything fancy, it's not anything out of the ordinary. You just know you can bite into this and get a good, satisfying cheeseburger. That's what this was. And so that was actually a lot more uplifting compared to some of the other stuff. Compared to the what I was worried I would be running into, which was like a lot of D- level dreck after what I saw with Lady Ballers, which, like I said, even that had its redeeming qualities. But this one was good, and I will say, and I know I'm going on, but talking about Gina Carano's character specifically, one of the interesting things. So this one, Run, Hide, Fight, and that other movie they made, it's called Shut In or something like that. The one about the woman that's trapped in a cupboard or something. I'm going to look at that one too. But somebody tried to say, like, well, Daily Wire says that they're tired of things like strong, liberated female characters and tough girl bosses in movies, and they're tired of that, so why are they showing us all of these female heroes and all of that? Trying really, really hard to find controversy where there really doesn't need to be any, but I will speak to that. This movie, Gina Carano's character, which, by the way, I really liked the like understated toughness of her. Like, she's not an over-the-top badass. She's just someone who's in survival mode, and she's comfortable being in survival mode. She lives on the prairie. She has to be in survival mode 24 hours a day, but she's someone comfortable in that mindset. That's the feeling. It's that like Clint Eastwood thing of just, you know, that go ahead and make my day attitude, and which is very satisfying in a Western. But talking about that, I'll tell you something, and I can say I feel like I can speak with utter certainty when I say this. I would imagine what the Daily Wire is talking about when their commentators like Ben Shapiro and whatnot get tired of hearing about, say they're getting tired of hearing about these, you know, female action heroes and everything. What they're talking about is, you know, the character that what we saw, that this is why the Marvels bombed and things like that. What we're getting tired of is not female characters. It's invincible girl. It's the invincible girl boss that don't need no man. That's what everybody's tired of. This, you know, it's like every female character in a movie now has to be the female version of One Punch Man. Like she has to be invincible and perfect all the time. And she has to be, every character's expected to be an invincible girl boss that don't need no man. And if she, and she can never not be an invincible girl boss that don't need no man. And if she is in any way, shape, or form internally conflicted, it's because even though everybody in the movie, including her, already knows that she's an invincible girl boss that don't need no man, she somehow also doesn't know that she's already an invincible girl boss that don't need no man. And the movie is about her learning that she's an invincible girl boss that don't need no man, even though she already knew that she was an invincible girl boss that don't need no man. That is so asinine and tired and over and done. And I will say, 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, when we started this rapid descent into the clown world that we now find ourselves in, there were a lot of cultural commentators out there saying they wanted good, well-written female characters. And now the end result of all of that has been the invincible girl boss that don't need no man. And that's what's so ironic, is that's not a good character. It's not well written. The real people have realistic flaws and realistic problems, and part of what makes Gina Carano's character so good in this is that, guess what? She's not an invincible girl boss that don't need no man. She's vulnerable. She's afraid. She's weak. She's all of these things, and the reason that's good is not because we're trying to impart some hidden agenda about female subjugation. The reason that's good is because seeing her rise to the occasion, overcoming her shortcomings, where the areas where she falls short, and achieving and standing up to the bad guys and kicking ass in spite of her vulnerabilities and weaknesses and fears. That is what's interesting to watch. Not an invincible girl boss that don't need no man who shows up and throws one punch at a guy that sends him flying through 3 or 4 walls and, you know, and is instantly destroyed. And to be fair, to me, as far as I'm concerned, that's not particularly interesting when male superheroes do it either. But that's the thing. That's what we're tired of. This is not an invincible girl boss that don't need no man. This is a woman who has something to fight for, and what she has to fight for is her husband and her children, which, guess what? At the time period that this movie was set, those would be pretty much the main things that most women, not only that most women would have that they would want to fight and die for, but the only things they could have that they would want to fight and die for. So, and I'm not suggesting that she dies in this movie. I'm not giving anything away. Like I said, this one was good. This one I recommend, and it was a lot of fun. Made me want to go back and watch Fistful of Dollars and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and all of that stuff. So, good time at the movies. My only complaint is that I don't have a way. I watch movies normally on my PS4. I don't have any way to do that. I tried playing it on the internet browser on the PS4. Couldn't do it. It said, Daily Wire said that I could play their app through Apple TV, but I couldn't do that. Couldn't figure out how to do that. Maybe I'm just slow on this, and I don't have a Roku, so I'm forced to watch these movies on my tablet, which is a shame because something like this, like I said, it really did have good cinematography, and it would have been nice to see it on a screen where I could really enjoy that and appreciate it. Anyway, oh, and also the Daily Wire's app. Whatever you think of their politics, their app leaves a lot to be desired. When I went to watch this movie, I went to their search field and I put in Terror on the Prairie, and I got a lot of things about the making of Terror on the Prairie, a lot of interviews with the stars of Terror on the Prairie, but the one thing that did not show up was Terror on the Prairie. I had to dig and dig and dig until I finally found it. So that's constructive criticism. Anyway, peace.